Yo, what's up everybody? Back with another video. Today, we're going to be traveling the world, virtually of course, to explore the surprisingly diverse landscape of gun ownership. We're talking places where owning a firearm is as common as owning a bicycle. But don't think for a second that it's a free-for-all. We're going to break down the licensing requirements, the regulations, the whole 9 yards to give you a real sense of what it's actually like to own a gun in these countries. Let's do this! Alright, first up on our global gun adventure is Sweden. Now before you picture Vikings roaming the streets with AKs, let me stop you right there. Sweden might seem like an unexpected contender on this list, but hear me out. They've got a long history of gun ownership, deeply rooted in their hunting traditions. But, and this is a big but, it's not as simple as walking into a store and slapping down some cash. Oh no, my friends, the Swedes take their gun control seriously. We're talking stringent background checks, mandatory safety courses, psychological evaluations, the whole shebang. And get this, you need a specific reason to own a gun in Sweden. Self-defense? Nope, not gonna cut it. Hunting or sport shooting? Now you're talking, it's like getting into an exclusive club, but with higher stakes. But here's the kicker, once you've jumped through all the hoops, and trust me, there are a lot of hoops, Sweden actually has a surprisingly high rate of gun ownership. It's like this weird paradox, super strict laws, but a lot of guns. Go figure, right? So, while Sweden might not be the first place that comes to mind when you think of gun-friendly countries, they've definitely earned their spot on this list. Next stop on our global gun tour, the Czech Republic. Now this is where things get interesting. Unlike Sweden, where gun ownership is seen as a privilege, the Czech Republic takes a much more, shall we say, liberal approach. They actually have a constitutional right to bear arms enshrined in their Charter of Fundamental Rights. That's right, it's the law of the land, baby. But don't think for a second that it's a complete free-for-all. You still have to jump through some hoops to get your hands on a gun. We're talking background checks, mental health evaluations, and mandatory training courses. You know, the usual suspects. But the bar for approval is significantly lower than in, say, Sweden. And here's the kicker. The Czech Republic allows for concealed carry permits. That's right, you can legally walk around with a hidden gun. Now this is where things get a little controversial. Some people argue that this open approach to gun ownership makes the Czech Republic a haven for criminals. But others counter that it actually makes the country safer, as law-abiding citizens are better equipped to defend themselves. It's a complex issue with no easy answers. But one thing's for sure, the Czech Republic definitely marches to the beat of its own drum when it comes to gun laws. Alright, let's shift gears and head south to Panama, a country that throws us a bit of a curveball in the world of gun laws. Now, Panama's relationship with firearms is complicated, to say the least. They've got this unique mix of relaxed laws and a culture that's generally wary of widespread gun ownership. It's like trying to mix oil and water, you know what I mean? On the one hand, getting a gun license in Panama is surprisingly straightforward. You've got your background checks, psychological evaluations, and safety courses, pretty standard stuff. But here's the catch. The process is notoriously opaque. It's like navigating a maze blindfolded with rumors of bribery and corruption swirling around like a dust devil. And even if you manage to snag a license, there are restrictions on what types of guns you can own and how much ammo you can buy. Plus, carrying a gun in public? Forget about it. Unless you've got a very specific reason, and even then, good luck with that. So, while Panama might seem like a gun enthusiast's paradise on paper, the reality is a bit more nuanced. It's a country where the laws are one thing, but the culture and societal norms paint a very different picture. Hold on to your hats, folks, because we're about to enter the land of precision timepieces, breathtaking scenery, and, wait for it, mandatory military service. That's right, we're talking about Switzerland. Now, Switzerland has this long and proud tradition of armed neutrality. They're like the peaceful warrior of Europe, always prepared but rarely spoiling for a fight. And this unique approach to national defense has had a profound impact on their gun laws. See, in Switzerland, serving in the military is mandatory for all able-bodied men. And guess what? They get to keep their service weapons at home after they've completed their service. Yep, you heard that right. It's like a graduation gift. Only instead of a fancy pen, you get an assault rifle. Now before you start picturing Switzerland as some kind of gun-toting utopia, let me pump the brakes a little. They've got strict regulations in place to ensure that those guns are stored safely and securely. And while Switzerland has a relatively high rate of gun ownership, they also have a remarkably low rate of gun violence. It's like they've cracked the code or something. So how does a country with so many guns manage to stay so peaceful? Well, it's a complex mix of cultural factors, responsible gun ownership, and a healthy dose of Swiss pragmatism. Whatever their secret is, the rest of the world could definitely learn a thing or two from them. Get ready for a crash course in Balkan history, folks, because we're heading to Serbia, a country where guns and national identity are deeply intertwined. Now, Serbia has a long and tumultuous past, marked by conflict and instability. And this history has shaped their relationship with firearms in a way that few other countries can understand. In Serbia, owning a gun is seen as a fundamental right, a way to protect yourself, your family, and your property. It's a deeply ingrained part of their culture, passed down from generation to generation. But don't think for a second that it's a free-for-all. Serbia has strict laws in place to regulate gun ownership. You need a license to buy a gun, and you have to renew that license every few years. You also need to pass a background check, a psychological evaluation, and a safety course. And while Serbia has a relatively high rate of gun ownership, they also have strict laws in place to prevent gun violence. For example, carrying a concealed weapon is strictly prohibited, unless you have a very specific reason, such as working in security. So, while Serbia might have a more relaxed attitude towards guns than some other countries on this list, they also understand the importance of responsible gun ownership. Next up on our global gun tour, we're heading south to Mexico, a country grappling with the complexities of gun violence and strict gun control laws. Now, Mexico's relationship with firearms is, to put it mildly, complicated. On the one hand, they have some of the strictest gun laws in the world. On the other hand, they're facing an ongoing battle against drug cartels and organized crime, which are often better armed than the Mexican military itself. It's a paradox that highlights the challenges of regulating guns in a country where illegal firearms flow freely across the border. So, what are the gun laws like in Mexico? Well, let's just say they're not messing around. There's only one legal gun store in the entire country, located on a heavily guarded military base. To even set foot in the store, you need to navigate a bureaucratic labyrinth of paperwork, background checks, and approvals that would make even the most patient person tear their hair out. And even if you manage to jump through all those hoops, you're extremely limited in the types of guns you can buy. Forget about high-powered rifles or semi-automatic weapons. You're basically stuck with low-caliber handguns. Let's shift gears and head down to South America, to the often overlooked nation of Uruguay. This little country, sandwiched between its larger neighbors, Argentina and Brazil, has a unique story to tell when it comes to guns. Now, Uruguay might not be the first place that pops into your head when you think of gun-friendly countries, but beneath its laid-back exterior lies a nation with a deep respect for firearms and a surprisingly pragmatic approach to gun control. You see, Uruguay has this fascinating history that shaped its relationship with guns. They've had their fair share of political turmoil and social unrest, which has led to a culture where self-reliance and personal responsibility are highly valued. And part of that self-reliance for many Uruguayans includes the right to own a firearm. But don't think for a second that it's a free-for-all down there. Uruguay might have a more permissive attitude towards gun ownership than some other countries, but they also understand the importance of keeping firearms out of the wrong hands. They've got a comprehensive licensing system in place that requires background checks, mental health evaluations, and mandatory safety courses, and they don't mess around when it comes to enforcing those laws. Get ready to dive into a world of vibrant colors, ancient Mayan ruins, and a complex relationship with firearms as we venture into Guatemala. This Central American nation has a fascinating history that shaped its gun culture in a way that few other countries can understand. Now, Guatemala has a reputation for being a bit, shall we say, rough around the edges. It's a country that's struggled with poverty, crime, and political instability for decades. And in a place where personal safety is often a major concern, it's no surprise that guns are seen by many as a necessary tool for self-defense. But Guatemala's relationship with firearms goes beyond just personal protection. Guns are deeply ingrained in the country's social fabric, often seen as status symbols or even family heirlooms passed down from generation to generation. But don't let that fool you into thinking it's a free-for-all down there. Guatemala might have a more relaxed attitude towards guns than some other countries on this list. They also have laws in place to try and regulate the flow of firearms. You need a license to buy a gun, and you have to go through background checks and all that jazz. But the problem is enforcing those laws in a country grappling with corruption and organized crime is easier said than done. Alright folks, buckle up because we're about to dive headfirst into the belly of the beast, the heart of the matter, the granddaddy of them all when it comes to gun culture, the United States of America. Now I don't need to tell you that the US has a, shall we say, complicated relationship with firearms. It's a country founded on the right to bear arms, enshrined in their beloved Second Amendment. But it's also a nation grappling with the devastating consequences of gun violence, from mass shootings to everyday acts of violence that barely make the headlines. It's a paradox that's torn the country apart for decades, with no easy answers in sight. Now, unlike many other countries on this list, the US doesn't have a single unified set of gun laws. Instead, each state gets to decide its own rules and regulations, which means you can go from a state where you need a license to buy a slingshot to a state where you can buy an AR-15 at a Walmart faster than you can say Second Amendment. It's a system that's as diverse and contradictory as the country itself. Some states, like California and New York, have implemented strict gun control measures, while others, like Texas and Arizona, have embraced a more, shall we say, laissez-faire approach. Hold on to your hats, folks, because we're about to enter a region where guns are as ubiquitous as sandals and tribal allegiances run deeper than the roots of ancient trees. That's right, we're talking about Yemen, a country where owning a firearm is about as regulated as ordering a cup of coffee. Now, Yemen's relationship with guns is deeply rooted in its tribal culture, where owning a weapon is seen as a symbol of manhood, a protector of family honor, and an essential tool for survival in a land where disputes are often settled with the barrel of a gun, rather than a gavel and a judge's orders. In Yemen, there's no central authority that really controls the flow of firearms. It's like a giant open-air arms bazaar where you can buy anything from rusty AK-47s to shiny new pistols, all without so much as a background check or a raised eyebrow. It's a gun enthusiast's dream, or perhaps their worst nightmare, depending on which way you swing on the whole gun control debate. But here's the thing, Yemen's lax attitude towards guns is a double-edged sword. While it might empower individuals and tribes to protect themselves in a volatile and often lawless environment, it also fuels a cycle of violence and instability that has plagued the country for decades. So, there you have it, folks. A whirlwind tour of some of the most gun-friendly countries on the planet. From the strict regulations of Sweden to the laissez-faire approach of Yemen, we've seen how different cultures grapple with the complex issue of gun ownership. But remember, this isn't just about laws and regulations, it's about understanding the cultural context, the historical factors, and the societal norms that shape a nation's relationship with firearms. If you dug this deep dive into the world of global gun laws, hit that subscribe button for more eye-opening content. And hey, before you go out and buy a musket or a slingshot or whatever tickles your fancy, do yourself a favor and check your local laws and regulations. Stay informed, stay safe, and keep those questions coming. Peace out.